Let's jump right into today because we are tackling one of the most stubborn, deeply ingrained pieces of financial folklore out there. The idea that renting is just a giant black hole for your cash. But is it? Let's run the actual math and see if this golden rule really holds up.
Renting is just throwing money away. You're building equity for somebody else. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You've probably gotten this well-meaning guilt trip from an uncle at a holiday dinner. But look, when we strip away that emotional baggage and just look at the raw numbers, this claim is absolutely not a universal law of wealth. It only works under a really specific set of conditions.
The whole problem with this myth is how it frames things. It treats rent as a 100% pure loss and a mortgage as a 100% pure investment. And realistically, neither of those extremes is even close to accurate. Both paths offer genuine, tangible value, and crucially, both come with non-recoverable costs, money that leaves your bank account forever. So the real question isn't whether you're throwing money away, but what exactly you're getting in return. So let's talk about why renting is not actually a waste. Think about what a rent check really buys you every single month. Obviously shelter, but it also buys ultimate flexibility. You have the total freedom to just pack up and leave when your lease is up, skipping the whole brutal, expensive home sale process. And honestly, the biggest perk? Zero maintenance risk. If the furnace dies in January or the roof caves in, that massive expense is entirely your landlord's problem. That peace of mind, that is a highly valuable financial shield. It is definitely not just thrown away money.
But then, what about a mortgage payment? Isn't that just pure equity building? Well, conventional wisdom loves to tell us that every dollar you pay the bank is just moving money from your checking account into a house-shaped piggy bank. But let's pop the hood on a standard monthly mortgage payment and see what's actually in there.
If you look at the early years of a typical 30-year mortgage, the reality is honestly a bit shocking. The actual equity building part, the principal, is tiny. It's just a sliver of your payment. The vast majority of your cash is going straight toward interest, property taxes, and insurance. The interest alone just eats up a disproportionate share right out of the gate. For the first decade, you are barely making a dent in the actual loan.
And here is the absolutely crucial point. Those non-recoverable costs in a mortgage, they are functionally identical to rent. Seriously, think about it. Mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance premiums, none of that builds equity, and you are never getting a dime of it back. Once you write the check, it's gone. You're just paying a lender and the government instead of a landlord. An expense is an expense. In fact, the disparity early on is massive. For the first 10 years of a standard mortgage, a massive chunk of that so-called investment is just sunk cost, money you'll never see again. So when people passionately claim renters are throwing money away, they're conveniently ignoring the absolute tornado of cash being thrown away in the early stages of homeownership. The bank gets paid first, and they get paid handsomely, way before you build any meaningful equity.
This is the piece of the puzzle almost everyone forgets. Financial researchers model wealth by looking at two totally distinct paths. On the buying path, you lock a massive down payment into the property and pay those monthly interest and tax costs. But on the renting path, you do something totally different. You take that big down payment lump sum, plus any money you save by renting instead of owning, and you invest it straight into the stock market. You put that liquid capital to work right away.
And when you run those two paths side by side, there is no universal winner. The math depends entirely on local home price appreciation versus specific stock market returns over your exact timeline. Sometimes a homeowner makes a killing because their neighborhood turns into the next tech hub. But other times, the renter who diligently invested their down payment into an S&P 500 index fund comes out way ahead, doubling their money while the homeowner's property value totally stagnates. It's completely conditional.
So after seeing all these hidden sunk costs and the real wealth-building power of investing your rent savings, you might be thinking, wait, does buying a house never make sense?
No, absolutely not. Homeownership is a fantastic wealth builder for a ton of people, and historically, over long timelines, it very often outperforms renting. But the real takeaway of this is that neither choice is automatically the superior one. You aren't a financial genius just because you bought a house, and you for sure aren't a fool throwing money away just because you rent an apartment.
Since the blanket rule falls apart in the real world, making this decision objectively means ditching the generic advice. You need a solid framework. 3 steps. Isolate real local numbers, separate your sunk costs, and factor in your exact timeline. Let's quickly break those down.
Step 1. Use a rent versus buy calculator with actual local figures. National averages are pretty much completely useless here. San Francisco behaves totally differently than a quiet suburb in Ohio, right? You need today's local rent prices, specific home prices for your target neighborhood, and current mortgage rates. Put in generic data, you're going to get a generic and probably wrong answer.
Step 2, and this is where almost everyone gets the math completely wrong. You cannot compare a full mortgage payment against rent. You have to strip out the equity-building principle. You only compare the non-recoverable costs, the interest, taxes, and insurance, against your monthly rent. That is the only way to get an honest, apples-to-apples view of the money that is truly leaving your pocket forever in both scenarios.
And step 3, factor in your timeline. Buying carries huge transaction costs, real estate agent fees, origination fees, closing costs. Because of that steep entry fee, a short stay of 2 to 3 years heavily favors renting. You just won't build enough equity to offset those costs. 5 to 7 years is kind of that murky break-even zone. But if you're planting roots for 10 plus years, that's when long-term appreciation usually gives buying a massive advantage.
So ultimately, both housing choices are just a complex mix of genuine value and ongoing non-recoverable costs. Rent isn't purely wasted money, and a mortgage payment isn't purely building wealth. Rent buys you incredible flexibility and totally shields you from maintenance risk. A mortgage requires paying heavy, non-recoverable costs to a bank and the government, all for the privilege of slowly building long-term equity.
It was never simply about which option magically builds equity by default. It's about which path actually fits your specific timeline, your local market, and your life goals. These decisions have to be driven by cold, hard local math, not by universal rules blindly repeated at family gatherings.
So, before you sign your next lease, or lock yourself into a massive 30-year mortgage out of some sense of societal obligation, take a step back. Run your local numbers. Factor in your opportunity cost. When you look closely at the reality of both paths, you really have to ask yourself, are you building wealth or just paying for an illusion? Thanks for joining me on this, and we'll catch you next time.